Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And this album is Toy. This is a David Bowie album from 2000, but if you were listening to music at that time, you would not have known it existed. That's because this album ended up going unreleased. And I think the main part of the story there is Bowie wanted to do this as what's called a surprise album, meaning there was no promotion and it would kind of be cool. Suddenly there's just a new David Bowie album in stores. And the record company wasn't a big fan of that. And the project just ultimately went unreleased. Now, the interesting thing with these songs is for the most part, they are not new Bowie songs technically, or weren't new in 2000. Rather, they were largely songs from the 1960s, from before David Bowie was famous, that might have been, released on singles or on the compilation album, The World of David Bowie, but never would have risen out of obscurity before. So this album, had it been released, was an attempt to give them a second life. David Bowie of the 1960s, of his very first album that's often forgotten, was kind of part of the Baroque pop movement, meaning there was some orchestral or classical influence on his songs, to use language loosely. And his particular writing style, while you could definitely describe it as weird, it wasn't the glam rock weird you'd find a few years later. It was more like writing old school British nursery rhymes kind of weird. So this album opens with a song called Dig Everything. This is an easygoing rocker with a seemingly optimistic message, of looking around and digging, liking everything. It actually is a funny structure in that it keeps repeating that phrase, dig everything, except to one line about a police officer who, I guess being a stodgy old representative of the establishment, does not in fact dig everything. Track number 2 is called You've Got a Habit of Leaving. So this one has a wall of sound thing going on. And I know that's a term associated with Phil Spector and his particular 1960s sound of bells and strings and horns. But since this is a re-recording of the song in 2000, this is like the indie rock modernized version of the wall of sound. So it's not literally Phil Spector's style of instrument, but it just has that layered feel going for it. And kind of like George Harrison's song You, if you look at the lyrics for this one on the page, they are embarrassingly minimal, but it just layers the music so perfectly that it comes across sounding intense. You would never know it as such a minimal song. Track number 3 is London Boys. This is the most sort of emotionally thoughtful sounding performance so far. So this one sounds a bit like one of the songs from Bowie's upcoming Heathens album, in that it's kind of like a mournful crooner's tune. Lyrically, it takes a vaguely similar vibe to Dig Everything, in that it's about generally appreciating everything one sees in the city, always having a good time when one's with one's London boys, but also acknowledging some negatives around the way. Maybe you shouldn't be popping all these pills. That's suggested in there. Track number 4 is called Karma Man. So from quite early in his adult life, David Bowie took an interest in Buddhism. And I had a hard time deciding whether there's like a particular Buddhist lesson in this song, or as with the later song, Silly Boy Blue, it's more like he's just using imagery from the Buddhist tradition, talking about a character participating in it. This one definitely sounds like it's of that 60s Baroque pop period, with a kind of fake glockenspiel in there and a little trumpet instrumental. And it kind of has a similar meaning to Bowie's famous song Changes, in that it's saying, life is about being a million different people, but one consequence of this is in any one moment, it's kind of hard to explain who you are. Bowie would have seen himself as such a collection of personalities. He, at least for a while, struggled to find who actually is me being myself and not being a character. Track number 5 is Conversation Piece. This one is sung in a very low vocal, similar to Stephen Merritt of the Magnetic Fields. It has a sound where it almost sounds like it's talking, but the enunciation is so crisp that it has a melodic quality anyway. This one seems to be about someone who can express themselves very well through art. So someone who can put a conversation piece in their room, but then finds when people actually just try to talk to them as a normal human, they feel kind of lost for words. This is definitely a feeling I have. I don't know if it's one Bowie personally experienced, though one has to think this song came from somewhere. Track number 6 is called Shadow Man. This has a somewhat different feel than the other songs we've heard so far because it's not from the very early Bowie era. This is left over from the Ziggy Stardust era. And it's kind of comparable to various songs from that era, like Life on Mars or Lady Stardust. In its tone, it's a little bit like rock and roll suicide, and a little bit of Alan Garson's piano playing on here sounds like Aladdin Sane. Overall, it's just a bit soupier and doesn't quite have the uniqueness of any of those songs, but it's still beautiful to listen to, and one can see where it would fit in on the Ziggy album. I guess it's about Ziggy's darker or at least grimmer side of Ziggy's personality, how it would have felt alienated from the world, even as Ziggy was this big rock star. Track number 7, called Let Me Sleep Beside You, opens with this very cool rock riff and kind of continues that neo wall of sound I talked about on track 2. So I talked about how track 1 progressed to track 3 in terms of enjoying the city, but starting to notice some dark things. And this one has an even stronger suggestion that while the city is cool and fun, there's something gritty going on. Track number 8 is called Hole in the Ground. This is one that I feel like it tries to create its lyrics with its literal instrumental sounds. So the bass playing as well as some of the lower vocals creates the feel of the music literally sinking into a hole. But then there's also this kind of psychedelic shift where at the end of the verses, there'll be references to something up in the sky above you, as if the hole is somehow transporting from the sky and up above. But its lyrics are, again, about increasing paranoia in the city. So there's kind of an arc in this album from simple, happy go lucky to increasingly disenchanted with the singer's surroundings. Track number 9 is called Baby Loves That Way. And this one maybe owes a little bit musically to Elton John's. I guess why they call it the blues. It's about a curmudgeony guy watching his wife cheat on him while he's almost feels like he's frozen in place. He feels like he's a toy, which I should mention is a metaphor that gets scattered throughout the album. Not until the very last song is it really obvious why he calls this album toy. I mean, maybe frozen person, naive person, child would be slightly more literal capturings of what's going on here, but hey, it's fun cover art. Trap number 10 is called Can't Help Thinking About Me. This is a bright sounding rocker where I feel like Bowie's voice comes closest to channeling his younger, higher sound. One thing that doesn't work with this collection is Bowie's voice changed so much over his lifetime that he really wrote his songs for someone who had a different vocal than he does here. This is a song about someone who's beginning to worry they've become corrupted. I guess maybe he's thinking about becoming a successful musician. I think this is also one where he commented when he performed it later in life that it was some of his weaker lyrics because there's a line where someone just says to him, "Hi, Dave." And I don't know, I thought that was like intentional deadpan, minimalist, I don't know, Flight of the Conchords style writing, but no, Bowie just viewed it as him not being very good with language yet. Track number 11 is Silly Boy Blue. So as I mentioned before, this is the second overtly Buddhist inspired song here. But again, I don't think you have to understand Buddhist philosophy deeply. It's more of just a story of someone kind of within a Buddhist context, a community of monks desperate to progress, to show that they have a grasp on their spirituality, that they're taking on the way of their fellow monks. And finally, this album ends with a song called Toy. And this one is only written from 2014. So unlike everything else on here, it's not really gathered from the past. But again, it's called Toy, brackets, Your Turn to Drive. And this, unfortunately, was my least favorite song on here. It kind of created this ambiance, I guess, of drifting forward on a journey of everything kind of blurring together beautifully. And if you think of this album as a unified concept, it's maybe the main character beginning to wake up out of a once troubling but now beautiful sleep and being reacquainted with reality and not being stuck in this toy body again. So did I love this as much as the classic Bowie albums? No, but there was a lot of mildly catchy material on here. Bowie, I feel like, is almost always a good lyricist, so there's almost always something to catch your attention. And certainly some of the rock and roll riffs that opened a few songs like Can't Help Thinking About Me and Let Me Sleep Beside You were very catchy. So let me know your thoughts on Toy in the comments below. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.